The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame.
Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I'm Reagan Kelly, and I'm joined this week by two of my fantastic co-hosts.
Laura Nash.
And Shane Kelly.
And this week, we are doing a bit of a Playdate update. It's been almost, it blew my mind when I looked at this. I had to look up the dates, and it has been like darn near 2 years since the Playdate came out. And since we did our first episode on it, it's been quite a while. When we recorded our first episode, and so far only episode about the Playdate, it was still pretty new. It was just hitting people's hands. None of us had received all of the 12 weeks worth of games of the Playdate Season 1. And so there's a number of Season 1 games that have honestly been sitting on our various Playdates for well over a year now. So there's some games for us to talk about there. But there's also, in the intervening time, been a lot of updates to the Playdate. Things like they've launched their official catalog store where you can download games directly on your Playdate. So there's a lot of stuff for us to talk about. I still have my Playdate. I still play it somewhat frequently, and in fact, honestly, I've been playing it more over the last few months than I had for months before that. So it seemed like maybe it was time for us to, dust off our Playdates if they have indeed gotten a little dusty, and talk about this weird little yellow console with a crank.
Yeah, this thing remains just a delightful curiosity. People will probably remember that this was made by a collaboration between Panic and Teenage Engineering. And both of those two groups have been always fun to watch. Panic has only recently announced a game I'm very excited for called Big Walk that's coming with them, between them and House, who did, what was it House did?
Goose Game, yeah.
Goose Game, that's right. Well, they were also Goose Game, yeah. And Big Walk looks like, I've only seen some clips of it, but it looks kind of like a cross between, I don't know, what does it look? Have you guys seen this? What does it look like to you?
I've seen a trailer and I found it pretty confusing. It seems kind of like a massively multiplayer, like, I don't know, hiking game where you all play as weird little like low poly duck looking guys.
Looks like a short hike meets I don't know. These odd creatures look very Katamari to me, but in a very realistic world. It's a cool looking game, and it just has my interest peaked. It says coming 2025 though, so I know I've got a bit of a wait. And then Teenage Engineering has continued to put out bizarre and interesting hardware. Most recently, they were big in the news for having made this thing that very much looked like a Playdate to me. Did you see the thing about, I think it's called the Rabbit AI companion? It's like
it's just gonna keep, what does it do? We don't know. It'll just keep learning. It could do everything eventually.
Yeah, it's a Tamagotchi that can do everything.
Mm-hmm.
and it has
it's
a camera.
Weird thing. It seems like the big pitch for that thing, not to turn this into a tech podcast, but it does seem like the big pitch for that thing is like, it's got a camera, it connects to a cloud-based AI service, it can look through the camera, and you can talk to it about what you and it are seeing. And that's a clever idea and could potentially have some interesting use cases. I could see it maybe being a cool accessibility thing, but the videos I've seen of it actually in operation, just the speed is it's really slow. Like I saw somebody like pointed at a bunch of cheese and be like, "How should I serve this?" And it was just it took like 15 seconds to be like, "You could do a cheese board," and I'm like, man, come on.
Yeah. I mean, it looks cool. I mean, it's obviously, like, when you look into the specs of this thing, it's clearly not capable of running a large language model or, anything approaching that on its own. So it must be going to the cloud for it, but it doesn't have, it only has Wi-Fi. So this is a device for you to use at home, but it's pocket size, or I guess at the office, but it's pocket sized. And I don't know, it just seems delightfully insane, like most of the
It's a
teenage engineering
smartphone app
devices.
in a plastic box is a thing. I don't understand why this, needs to be a separate physical device from your smartphone. This seems like a smartphone feature.
And like the Playdate, it has a crank. It has essentially
it has a little thumb wheel thing.
Yeah, a thumb wheel. And I just love how optimistic they are in pitching this. It says a device for doing almost anything. Yes, it does, and they seem to have a really. I mean, I'm very, very covetous of a lot of teenage engineering products. In particular, as a podcaster and audio lover, they have this just absurdly expensive portable audio recorder. I'm going to try and find that and share that with you guys. Have you seen this thing?
I have. I also covet it deeply. Oh. It's just a ridiculous, beautiful object. It costs like $2,000 or something like that. It's very, very, very.
But it has a little dial that spins while you record, and then if you want to listen back, you can like spin the little spinny spinner. I guess I'm a sucker for teenage engineering things with a spinny spinner on them.
That's all you want.
Mm-hmm. That's all you want these days.
They are incredible. And and from that perspective, like the hardware of the Playdate has held up for me. Like I know, like sometimes I buy little like random game objects, controllers, weird handhelds, stuff like that, and I play with them for a while, and then ultimately they end up collecting dust. I go back to touch them later, and they feel subtly broken in an inexplicable way. Like this is just a common experience. I think folks who buy a lot of game crap probably have. But the Playdate has not felt that way for me. Like it feels as like, wow, fresh, what a cool little gadget that it did like 2 years ago when I got it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that it's like my favorite game hardware ever or anything, but like as a small object that sparks joy, it continues to do that 2 years on. And that's saying something pretty solid for it.
I think with my one bedroom shared with another human lifestyle, the Playdate can't be played as often as I'd like because of the lack of backlit. And it got kind of, I made a joke, I think on the first episode, that it makes a nice clock. It makes a great clock because you can set it to do things like, say, it's 20 past 10 or it's a quarter past 10 on Thursday, January 25th.
I love that. That's the clock mode that I use as well. The little speech bubble that says the time, date and time in plain speech. I love that.
And it's yellow and cheery, and I love looking at it. And I have it next to my my also bright yellow picture a day calendar.
Oh, that's very cute looking.
It is very cute looking. So it's with my little yellow clock and my little yellow picture a day calendar go next to each other. But I don't pick it up to play it as often because of the backlit. But I think I use it as almost like a fidget toy. It's very good. I haven't played as many of the long-term games. I'm still like catching penguins and going through circle mazes, which I'll talk about today. When I have had time to do things that are a little less of the Wario mini game thing, I've enjoyed it. But for me, it's been, if I'm looking for a longer play session, I'm picking up the Miu Mini instead. If I need a handhold like if I'm going on a bus or a train, because I can't rely on lighting. And I've
been kind of surprised because you're totally not alone. Like the thing that people complain about with the Playdate is that it's not a backlit screen. And, that makes it hard to play. And, some people just say, hey, I can't play this in my house.
I end up tilting it quite a bit so it catches the light better. And it's almost like a not ergonomic tilt. Like I don't hold it flat like I hold other devices. I tilt it past 45 degrees so it catches the most light from the overhead.
I think this is just going to be something that like literally depends on your home. I have been shocked at how much of that feedback I've heard because like I can use, this is not me doing like a weird humble brag about the lighting in my house. It's just that like my house is pretty brightly lit. I have lots of ceiling lights in every room, can light type of things. And so like I can use the Playdate in every room in my house in almost every angle, and I've just never had any problems with it. And so when I hear people complain about it, I'm like, well, wow, what kind of cave are you living in? And then I get on a podcast.
Well,
with,
again, I play portable devices in transit, and buses,
Well, and transit for you is
subways.
underground. Subways
Right.
not known for their great lighting.
Yeah.
The debate has gone on TikTok for a while. In fact, it's not even a debate if you look on TikTok. There was a TikTok that went viral a while ago that said something along the lines of, I don't have many rules for my house, but I do have one, and that is that we never, ever, ever, ever use the big light.
Yeah.
And
Oh, that's the Landon Talks. The Southern influencer was like, big light or lots of small lights? You have an opinion.
yes, and TikTok, and I think a lot of people have latched onto this idea that it is a sin to turn on the big light. And if anyone agrees with that, it is my wife. We spent thousands of dollars redoing the lighting in our living room, and she will never turn any of it on. So no, she actually approved a plan to put in just a raft of can lights and a gigantic dome light in the ceiling fan. And the first thing she does when she walks into the living room is to turn all of those off and to turn on the lamps.
This is so weird to me.
Our mutual friend Jennifer came to my apartment, and we were just using natural lighting because there's a huge window, and I turned on the overhead light to like, because we were about to do the projector, and I was pulling it down and showing her like the dimmer, and she was like, "Oh, you got to get some lamps in here." And I was like, I literally have like her first thing. Guest to the house was like, "Ooh, you turned an overhead light on. You've done something wrong."
Y'all so weird, man. Like, I don't understand this, man. Like, I go into it if my house is too dim, I feel claustrophobic. Like, I need light. I need a bright space. And, ideally that's like natural light drifting in beautiful shafts from a window. But like,
I just absolutely love you saying you're claustrophobic when you have more living space than anyone else on this podcast. You are out in the suburbs with 25-foot ceilings and an enclosed porch, and Laura is in a literal shoebox.
Well, for listeners who can't see behind me, because we are recording at it's almost 10:30 p.m. and I'm trying to make sure I can go to bed afterwards. I have blackout curtains drawn, and I am not using the overhead light, so that when I go to, I'm not going from full brightness recording into a pit. So I am sitting in a dark cave, as far as my coworkers know. There are lights in New York. I just don't have them on at the moment. Anyway, if I cannot see the Playdate at my desk right now, and so I keep alternating my laptop lights to see the screen to reference it during the game. And that's not the Playdate's fault. I just know that like in this, if I'm ready for bed, I can't play the Playdate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some people I think have this response to this. We're like, well, man, this is a deal killer for me, and I'll just wait for Playdate 2, which will surely be color and backlit, which I don't think is true. Like, I think the chances of happening. I don't think it's ever happening. Never happening. And like, to me, like the screen, like, I know we talked about this on the first, it's 2 years ago. The screen for the Playdate it's a lot like, to me, like the screen for something like a Kindle. Like, of course, some Kindle, many Kindles are like backlit, but like
my Kindle is backlit.
Yes, that's true. Okay, but like for me, it's like it's such a revolutionary looking screen to me. Like it is
beautiful,
unbelievable, cool screen, and so like. Yes, it does have some limitations.
When I play it before 3 p.m. in the winter, it is a beautiful screen.
Yeah, I'm really tempted to get one of those clip-on book lights for the thing.
I literally did do that a couple of days ago.
This is not a game changer. I'm just explaining, like, so the Playdate is a fidget game player because I tend to do most of my game playing in the evenings, and I like it to be cozy. And the Playdate, due to the lighting, is not suited for cozy environments. So I play it a lot during the day, like during like breaks from work or like lunch breaks when it is nice and bright and well lit. I do not play long gaming sessions, and that's just kind of my lifestyle. Yours will vary, but my reviews will be mostly on the mini games because of the backlit factor.
Well, speaking of fidgets and mini games and TikTok, I will just jump right in here because I want to wholeheartedly recommend Root Bear by Team Root.
Tell me about Root Bear. I've not played this.
First off, Root Bear is really it's a easy game to get into. It's just like $3 on the Playdate store. This is their new catalog store. And in this game, you are the root bear serving bears their root beer. And this is, if you remember the game Root Beer Tapper, it's slightly like that, a little bit, but not so much. It's it uses the crank as the handle for a root beer tap, and bears will come up to the bar, and will have a variety of different glasses, and they'll point on the glass to how high they want their glass to be filled up.
Oh, that's delightful.
And you will pour, and it kind of simulates the kind of foamy head of the beer that's being poured. But the real draw of this game, by the way, these bears are extremely precise in how much root beer they want. And the art for this game is the real draw, because the bears get when they walk up and they tell you how much beer they want, they're very relaxed looking. But the instant you start pouring, they have just lethal levels of stress crossing their faces. And if you,
it's like Ren and Stimpy stressed.
Yes, and if you overflow a glass, they will have like a Junji Ito level horror face that they like freak out. This game kind of went viral on TikTok for a while, just because it's a really it's a mini game, but it is just delightful, and you could kind of put it in anyone's hands and they'll instantly understand the interaction with the crank. They'll laugh at the insane faces of the bears. When you can get the perfect pour and the bears just sort of glow with pleasure at the perfect pour, it's a fantastic moment in gaming. So I do recommend Root Bear.
Just to backtrack a second, like the first game you're mentioning here, perfect transition, Shane, and that game is amazing. But this is the first catalog game we've talked about. So we have a few games to talk about that are the sort of the remainder of season 1, which we were in the middle of. If folks remember who maybe aren't Playdate people, the Playdate comes with a season of games, which is their sort of like 24 game, 12 week, drops where you get games just popping up on your Playdate.
I fully expected them to just drop season 2 by now, but the catalog came along instead, which was a little surprising. And I found myself, I kind of prefer this, but I also, I don't know how you would have priced the catalog, but I was surprised by some of the pricing on some of these games. I did not expect there to be like $12 to $13 to $15 games on the Playdate. I guess that's me. Inflation.
I also was expecting like early days of iOS store where like the max would be like $6. I mean, that was just because of the size of games in the catalog had kind of primed me for that. And that is probably unfair, but I think I was also surprised at the range of pricing, because it went from like, root beer was $3. I think also that is probably because the type of game I'm looking for feels like I'm looking for the lighter, snackier things.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I was
There's
surprised.
sort of like a spread. It seems like people are sort of starting to crystallize around pricing like they did in the early days of iOS, and it seems like there's sort of kind of two tiers. There's games that are like these smaller things like Root Bear or Yo-Yo-Zo, which I can talk about a little bit later. These sort of smaller arcadey little mini game things, and these have sort of gelled around the like $3 to $5 price range, and then there are games in the like $8 to $12 price range that tend to be seemingly more kind of full game type games that have a little more going on or a little more complete. I think those prices are fine. They're pretty reasonable. I can talk about several like $10 games from the catalog store on here where I'm like, man, if this game was on Steam for $10, it would also be a deal, like totally fine. So I haven't had any like shock at the pricing. I think actually they've been the pricing has settled down to be a pretty within what I would have expected.
The one that has held me off, I looked at a game called P Racing, which it stood out to me because on their like staff picks list, they said that P Racing is a pinnacle of technical achievement on the Playdate, which of course I want to see that. And when they say the pinnacle of technical achievement on something that pretty underpowered, basically it looks kind of like a SNES racing game, right? It has kind of a nice Mode 7 tilted track and some other cars and stuff that you can see. That's cool, but is that something that I want to spend $12 to experience? I couldn't really justify that to myself.
I think the main thing keeping me from buying more stuff in the catalog is that there are so many season 1 games I have not touched. And so because I got so many games out of the gate, it feels kind of like trying to buy another like Nintendo cartridge, and I look at like my full little stack and I'm like, oh yes, I never beat Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker. Like I'm like, do I need to buy a new one? Like I feel like that it's that like the backlog of games is almost more visible on the Playdate because you got to scroll through all of season 1 to get to the catalog. So you're like consciously not playing the games you've paid for to go spend money. And I think it's literally the scrolling down to the catalog that got me a little like hesitant. It's not as much of the price. It's just literally
I totally get that.
The guilt, the queue.
Something that's been interesting to me about it is like the season 1 games were all, because of the way that the season model worked, developed on test hardware before Playdates were in people's hands. And some of the games that have come out in the catalog store, they just feel different than the stuff that came out during, there's a few really advanced and interesting games in season 1. But like there's some games in the catalog that I'm just like truly impressed with. So it's a kind of a different, like, I totally get what you're saying. Like I have games in my backlog from season 1 that I've been meaning to play or meaning to play more of. For now like 2 years, which is a bit of a pain. But like I'm still buying about a game a week on the Playdate, which is, probably not great, but
that's
like
a lot more than me.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say that ramped up a little bit recently. I don't know why, but
maybe one game quarterly or semi-annually so far. So I'm not putting a lot of money and time into this device these days, I guess.
Yeah, it's been a little bit interesting for me in that like the Playdate has filled a niche that I kind of only sort of knew that I needed to fill, which is that like I don't know if you guys will empathize with this. I have this like weird anxiety whenever I leave the house that I'm like deathly afraid of being bored, like being someplace and being bored. Maybe this is from the pain of being a child and realizing that like, I'm going to be someplace that my parents have dragged me and I'm going to be bored for the next hour or whatever. And so I have this like weird...
Does that even happen to kids these days?
I don't think it does. And honestly, I have a smartphone in my pocket. Like this is an absurd concern, right? There's literally no reason for anyone to ever feel this in 2024. And yet I do. Walking out the door, I'm like, have I prepared for the eventuality of me being stranded somewhere and needing something to do for 8 hours? And so I like to have something in my pocket. Like I like to bring myself a little toy,
I do have pictures of my coworker playing their Playdate on a bench in Paris. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, you're in Paris. Like, and they said, oh, I mean, my partner was reading and I decided the Playdate was how I wanted to spend my time. It's like, where were you sitting? I was like, look around you.
You know what? I think it's totally fair.
But I mean, there are different types of... There are beautiful. There are so many types of people in the world. And
and it's not even for me so much about playing the thing, like I'll carry the Playdate with me in my pocket. It goes in my pocket along with my AirPods, doesn't take a whole lot of space up. And do I take it out and play it? about 1 in 10 times that I carry it around. Like it's not that common. It's a comfort
Is it
object
uncomfortable
for me
in a
in
pocket?
illness.
I haven't put it in a pocket because I mean, women's pockets are terrible, but it feels a little. The corners are rounded, but it feels a little sharper.
No, I haven't had
Does it
any
hurt?
issue.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you can carry a phone in your pocket, it's like that minus half. It's,
Yeah, I have sat on it for extended periods of time without realizing it.
yeah,
That's good
it's
to
fine.
know.
Yeah, it's a very pocketable life. It's actually kind of taken over a role that was at one time in my life fulfilled by the Game Boy Micro. This is the incredibly tiny GBA, and it's kind of better. And because of that, I do dip into it semi frequently, and it's been nice to sort of know it's there even in days when I'm not going to play it. And when it's so much more pocketable, so much more portable than a lot of the other game devices I have. It's such a different thing than like throwing my Steam Deck in a bag or something like that. So I actually have used it quite a bit. So I go into the Playdate catalog store every week. The catalog store they've really kind of mirrored the approach that Nintendo took with the Wii eShop and some of the other eShop stores, in that they do like weekly drops on a fixed day of the week. I forget what day of the week it is now, but like you get a little notification on the Playdate device and potentially via your email if you want, and you can go in and see what's new. And every week I go and take a look at what the new games are. And I don't buy one of them every week, but, semi-frequently I'll decide, $5 for that. That sounds pretty cool. Let me check that out. And I'll play it a couple of times. And sometimes if it's especially good, I'll stick with it. I thought we could go ahead and just talk a little bit about, maybe we'll come back to the season 1 games, but let's talk a little more about some of these catalog games that have been worth downloading. The first thing I'd mention is that catalog, when it first launched, I think very, very, very cutely, they launched it with 2 free games to get people to like set up an account on the catalog store and like figure out how it worked. And those 2 games were Recommendation Dog and Real Steel. Shane, I think you played a little bit of Recommendation Dog.
Yeah, Recommendation Dog is, it's a very simple puzzle game. You are some sort of dog that recommends things to people.
Classic.
And I think the structure is supposed to be like a temp agency. So people will walk through the door in front of you. You're kind of visually, you're seated at a desk, and a person will appear in your doorway and say, like, "Hey, I need someone who is a great artist." And then you will look down to your Rolodex, and using the crank, you will scroll through your Rolodex to find someone from a Rolodex full of these little person profiles. And it's a time-based kind of action game. Now, I don't know, action is exactly the right word here, but it is fast-paced because there's a timer. And there's not that much dog stuff going on in the game because it's first person. So you are a dog, I believe. But there's an option on the main menu that you can click on to bark, and that is nice. But yeah, it's simple. It reminds me a little bit of Guess Who, in a way. You have people kind of come through the door and say, "Hey, I need someone to join my cult. They need to be dumb and gullible." You like scroll through and you choose somebody. So that's kind of fun. It's a bit of a memory game, a bit of a puzzle game. It is fast paced. You can do kind of a high score chase on it. So yeah, Rec Dog is a fun one, and it's free. So why not?
I also really enjoyed the other free game that they added. Both of these were from I'm not sure if they're a publisher or what the situation is there, but from from a developer / publisher, I'm not sure, called Sweet Baby, that released both of these. And I think they were the same people that did the Marbles game from season 1, Lost Your Marbles or whatever it was called. Anyway, both of these are, I think, very high in terms of high bars for quality. Real Steel is kind of like a fishing game.
I believe we covered a game from Sweet Baby that we ranked very highly as a short game of last year, and that was Sable.
Ah, interesting.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I didn't put that together. I was going to say that Recommendation Dog was directed by Jalvir Nelson, who we've also talked about some of his games on here before. They got some good indie talent on some of this stuff. But the premise with Real Steel is that like it's a future world where 99% of the world's wealth resides in the mansion fortresses of 5 billionaires. Wow, ripped from the headlines of today, right? and you are like a thief that uses like a fancy fishing, I don't know, what do you call it, fishing rod to steal stuff from the wealthy. And it's just like at first I was like, wow, this is the missing fishing game on the Playdate, but of course no, it's not.
That we kept yelling about on the first one.
There's still not really like a proper like 90s style fishing game, which I think is great. Actually, I love it. But it actually reminded me a whole lot in a way of like Drill Dozer. It has this same sort of like energy to it's got like NPCs that will tell you about like a place where you can steal something, and then you've got these very cutesy little characters, and there's little dialogue scenes, and then you do a little cool kind of mini game where you have to use a weird little fishing line thing to drill down into a rich person's mansion and steal their expensive stuff. And it's a really good game, actually. Like I like this one quite a lot. So the fact that both of these games are available for free on the Playdate, as sort of a like extended part of the season 1 kind of model, I thought was really cool. And it was a nice kickoff to the catalog store. I've probably bought about 10 or 15 games on the catalog store overall. I'm not going to talk about all of them. Some of them have been kind of like, oh, well, that was neat. I'm kind of done with it. Mm-hmm. But there've been a few that I think are absolutely freaking bangers, like incredible games. And there's two main ones that I want to absolutely recommend to everybody who owns a Playdate. If you want, like I mentioned these very briefly when we did our Game of the Year episode, because both of these came out in the last year and were both incredible games that I've been playing a lot of on the Playdate. So apologies if I've been talking for a while. I'm going to tell you about both Space Rat Miner and Under the Castle, both of which are sort of roguelike-ish kind of games.
I hear Space Miner and I'm like, is Space Rat Miner like Space Miner?
I don't know. What is Space Miner? What do you mean?
It was a game for iOS that back in the day had like a cowboy theme where you were mining ore and upgrading your station.
Oh, okay. Not quite. But Space Rat Miner was the first of these that I checked out. And I was very excited about it because visually it looks a lot like not Drill Dozer. I just mentioned that separately. Mr. Driller. It visually looks a lot like Mr. Driller. So it's a roguelike take on Mr. Driller or similar kind of drilling games. You are a rat. So you're on a barren planet. On the surface of the planet, there's a little building that just clones rats. And you continually, every time you do a run, you are a new cloned rat from the rat cloning facility. And your rat gets equipped with a little drill and a little spacesuit. And you have to go into the mine. And the mine is a sort of endless column of blocks. And you have to drill down through the blocks. And there's all sorts of different obstacles and things. So there's some blocks that are easier to drill through or harder to drill through. You have different meters to watch. So you have to keep track of like how much oxygen do you have? Can I collect, just like Mr. Driller, you have to collect oxygen, little bubbles as you go to try to make sure you have enough air. But also you have to make sure you have enough battery in your drill. And so you have to stop periodically to use the crank to power up the rat's drill. But of course, that might happen at a time when you are dealing with other obstacles, like drilling into an area where there's sudden spews of lava that you have to evade, or little boulders that will drop on you if you drill underneath them, or other sorts of obstacles, eventually little enemies that kind of move around underground, and if you touch them, you will be killed. And it has this sort of roguelike roguelite element where you are over time gaining money as you drill and are powering up your rat by buying upgrades to things like your drill or the battery pack for your or your the air tanks for your spacesuit, the battery pack for your drill, buying additional like heart upgrades so that you can be hit once and not immediately end your run, that kind of thing. And I played something like 70 or 80 runs of this so far, like a lot. I played a lot of Space Rat Miner. And I'm still not that far. From what I gather, there are 4 bosses, and I've only ever gotten through the first boss so far. I'm still in the process of like powering myself up. I've gotten very, very close to getting to the second boss, and that's about as far as I've gotten. So there's a lot more of this to see. The bosses are no great shakes, but still kind of like it's nice to break up the endless drilling with a little boss battle, unless you lose, in which case the bosses are bullshit. Why did they put these in? I really, really like this game. It's if you're a Mr. Driller lover like I am, this isn't quite the same. It doesn't have the sort of like puzzly element where the blocks fall and combine and vanish in Tetris-y kind of ways. But it has the same, it looks a lot like Mr. Driller, and in many ways it plays a lot like Mr. Driller. But I think combining Mr. Driller or some elements of it with a roguelike is smart as hell and like really
I'm
awesome.
I'm gonna try this out.
Yeah, I love it.
Nice.
It's a really fun game. And this was the first game that made me think, wow, roguelikes are perfect on the Playdate. Because, of course, like we've talked about the various reasons for this, but the Playdate kind of works best for short sessions. I'm not going to sit down and play my Playdate for like 3 hours, but like playing it for 15 minutes is perfect. And a roguelike is ideal for that because it has that one more play kind of thing. You have a little bit of meta progression with something like this, but the individual game sessions are short and it's easy to put away when you're done. Love it. And because of that, I immediately thought, wow, I want to play more roguelike type games on the Playdate. And so the other game I'm really going to sell people on here, which I think is the best game on the Playdate today, is Under the Castle. Under the Castle is a very traditional roguelike. You play as a little guy. The art style is great. It's very readable, very cool looking little sprites. The art style sort of vaguely reminds me of like what if SNESs were 1-bit color like this. It has that kind of vibe. And it is a turn-based roguelike where you have to go into dungeons and collect items. And it's, all the standard trappings of the roguelike genre.
Yeah,
it has a little
real roguelike-y roguelike. It has, first, the thing I would say about it is it starts you off really easy with just the basics, but I really liked that it opened up with your first like 3 quests, 3 different dungeons with different objectives and quests that you can go to. And the way that you kind of navigate around in those is really simple and reminiscent of the original Rogue style games where you're using the D-pad to just move on a grid, bump into enemies to fight with them, and so it's a very simple, straightforward game. But you get these quests to take you into the different dungeons. I think there's like a crypt. There's I forget what they're called. It's a simple, straightforward roguelike that kind of scales with you, and you kind of always have the option to kind of go to the different dungeons, and if you feel like a little different vibe. And the art, the graphics for it are really superb for something like this. Everything is very clear and readable on that beautiful little crisp black and white display. I wish we could put a picture of this game up for you because it's the best looking game of this type. One of the things I've had a problem with on some Playdate games is just it can, not everything artistically works that great for me on the screen, which I love the screen, but you really have to do a good job of like making stuff readable. There's a game that I really wanted to like that I actually think is kind of similar called Ratcheteer. Ratcheteer is a kind of Zelda-ish adventure game I thought I'm going to really like this because it has a kind of a light mechanic, right? Where you're carrying like a lantern and turning your lantern on and off as part of the mechanic of the game. The screen is mostly always dark on this one, and that doesn't actually work that well for me on the Playdate. There's kind of a hint of the screen with a little bit of light poking through. With Under the Castle, it's very bright, and things are drawn very lightly with very, how would you describe the art style? I think it's very minimal in terms of the pixels. Everything's very, very bright and crisp.
It's clearly going for I think it's very much trying to imitate some of the Game Boy Zeldas, like what's the like Link's Awakening kind of vibe in a lot of ways, and also in its gameplay. But it does, art wise, it's like it does really wish it had those like 4 gray colors like the Game Boy has. But I don't know. I think it's a very pretty game. I think maybe it's it isn't. I think it looks great.
Yeah, a lot of the games on the Playdate really rely on dithering to make up for the kind of lack of grayscale. And Under the Castle doesn't at all. It's just really nice, crisp black and white. And I think that's my preference.
Yeah, Under the Castle is it blows me away. And I think if this was like just a straight up like here's a roguelike on Steam, I think this would still hold up pretty well. And I think the thing that it does really, really well is the missions. You kind of mentioned this, but what I love about it is that not only does it open up 3 different dungeons with different play styles. So one is, kind of to explain the missions thing, each of the different dungeons gives you a series of missions rather than just, like a typical very old school roguelike sending you into the dungeon and saying, go to the bottom and kill the big bad and make your way back out. And, the first time you play that, your chances of doing that are approximately 0. So you're going to lose 500 times before you win. This game starts you with a mission that says, go into this dungeon and kill 1 enemy, and then the exit will spawn on whatever floor you're on and you can leave. And then, second mission is go in and kill 2 enemies, right? And each of the 3 different dungeons has a different playstyle. So one of them is the missions are all based on killing a certain number of enemies. Another one is collecting a certain number of orbs. These are these items that you can kill enemies or find in other ways, and you have to collect a certain number of items. And what is the third one? Off the top of my head, it's escaping me. It's like, freeing prisoners. That one's kind of interesting. You have to like find a key and like free. I haven't done that as much of that one, where you have to like find and free prisoners imprisoned on various levels of the dungeon. So having these different sort of different play styles and different dungeons is really cool. And the fact that like, it just feels so much more manageable to be like, well, okay, I'm up to the level where I have to kill 10 enemies before my exit will spawn. Feels so much more fulfilling than, and of course, there's also this element of like, you can find items in the dungeon, and if you complete your mission and leave the dungeon, then those items get added to your stock of items that are at the sort of top level of the dungeon that you can choose as your starting loadout.
Yeah, there are, you can have, I think, like 10 things in your loadout, but there's 30 different items that I think are in the game, and as you go in, you can pick up one of any of the items that you've collected. In fact, I think you can, I haven't unlocked that many of them, but you can basically fill up your inventory with stuff on the way into the dungeon, which is a neat way to do the progression. I'm assuming that once I beat these 3 dungeons, that the castle itself is the 4th dungeon, but
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
We
haven't gotten that far yet, but it's more interesting to me than a lot of like retro style roguelikes, because it does have this sort of like, I like to win better than I like to lose, and having the like, here's a mission that you can complete, no matter what level you're at, and having multiple choices of like what style of mission you feel like playing at any given time, that's huge. And so I think this is a really, really well done one of these, and it feels really at home on the Playdate. The other thing I want to mention about it that I think is just super cute and clever is the way that it has the mana system, the magic system in it.
You have the hat thing.
The hat thing, it's so cute. It has this, you have a certain amount of mana. Your guy is this like tiny little man in a big sombrero. And
It's
if
clearly
you
a
have,
wizard hat, not a sombrero.
it's a sombrero, man. It looks like a little sombrero to me at that size. And so you can, the way that it works is like you undock the crank and then you do a half turn clockwise to have the wizard guy slurp up into his hat and fly around like a little UFO in the hat. And let's say you have 10 mana. That means you can fly around for 10 moves or turns before you have to pop back out of your hat. And while you're flying around inside your hat, you are invincible and you can cross gaps or pits. So, saving your mana to be able to do that, to like cross vital gaps or what have you, is great. But just like the tactile, like it kind of feels like, oh, I'm going to like rotate the crank to like fold up into the hat. It's very cute. And then you like rotate the crank back again to like, plop down out of the hat. It's so cute. It's such a good mechanic. I really, really like that. So it's just such a really well done game. I can't say enough good things about Under the Castle. I think it's the best game on the Playdate.
I think Laura, and I think you and Laura would probably really like Demon Quest 85.
I have played it.
What did you think?
Tell me about it, because I only really just scratched the surface of that one. I think I booted it up.
Are you saying that because it's a point and click on the Playdate? Are you saying that's why you and Laura would like it?
I'm saying that because I think it has elements of the Obra Dinn genre that we have yet to fully name. It's a game where you've got some teenagers who really want to summon the devil to kind of fulfill their wishes, and you have to
It's so you can get more popular. You keep summoning demons so you can be popular, which is amazing. I'm already in on the pitch. That's why I played it.
Aesthetically, the game is great. It has just really fantastic illustrations of the teenagers and the demons. And you have to make deals with the demons for what you want. You have to summon the right demon. You have to have the right things prepared, like playing the right music, things like that. And you have to have a really careful reading of your demonic tome and of all your like descriptions of these various teens and what they want and so on and so forth.
It's pretty great that I love a tonal switch game. And I think this does a really good balance of like the demons have a very highfalutin, very archaic, very grand things. And then you're also reading descriptions of which girl from your biology class you'd rather invite to the summoning circle. And that's the balance that I liked a lot. It's like a little bit, the reason I said it's like a point and click is because it's got that like puzzle logic of point and click. Like the peanut butter sandwich and the orchid should go together, of course. Like it has that same kind of leapy logic stuff. I found that fun. I could see how others would not. I think when I was looking at other reviews of this, it was kind of like people who didn't vibe.
Yeah.
Like I completely get why you wouldn't vibe.
I do too, and I did not complete this game. I did solve a few of the little, summoning circle puzzles. I did I very much appreciate the vibe of the game. So it's something where I think it should be in the conversation. If you have a play date, you probably got season. Can you have a play date without season 1? I think everyone has this game, so it's worth exploring if that's your vibe. Actually, speaking of Obra Dinn, there is something very important to discuss on the Playdate.
Yes.
And that is is the guy's name Lucas Pope that did Obra Dinn? Yes. Okay. Lucas Pope has a game coming for the Playdate that has been under development for a while. And it's called something about Mars.
Mars After Midnight. Yeah.
Mars After Midnight. Mars After Midnight has been under development for quite a while, but it's been, one of the interesting things is I saw his dev log for this like 6 months ago. And and he was showing some of his progress on the game. It looks fun and funny and fabulous. But that said, when I went and checked his devlog for this again recently, it looks like he hasn't done much on it in the intervening 6 months ish. So it appears that he is working on other projects, including porting Papers, Please to mobile devices, which is probably a very lucrative and sure thing approach for him, rather than spending a lot of time creating a tiny bespoke black and white Martian freak illustration.
But the premise is that you run a community center for Martians, and I think that sounds great. I hope this exists and I can get my paws on it.
It must.
And I hope at that time I've played enough season 1 games that I can feel totally fine. It's a Lucas Pope game. I'm buying it day one, no matter how guilty I feel. Let's be real. I have no patience. It's like my fizzle. You just
exactly
do
the
it.
Kind of thing where they can probably get me to pay $12 or whatever for a Playdate game.
100%. Can I talk a little bit about some of the games I was playing back in season 1 we never got to talk about?
Sure.
I will say that one I enjoyed a lot, but I don't have much to say about is Spellcorked, because it's basically witch cooking mama. It is you're making potions. It's got that mini game thing. I didn't know the Playdate had an accelerometer until it was tilt to pour the potion. I was like, oh my God, I didn't know this has an accelerometer.
Yeah, I don't think I've played any games that really use I know it's in there, but I've not used anything that used it.
Yeah, they have you tilt it to the side when you finish your potion to pour it in the vial before you ship it to your clients. It does when you start it up. I got a little nervous because you know how games that are humorous chat a ton at the beginning of the game and you don't know if it's ever going to calm down.
Mm-hmm.
It was very noisy. Your cat was talking to you. You had comments on everything. I eventually it did calm down. I did enjoy it. I think it's also good for short sessions. They're separated into days. Even if you don't do the potion right, you get rewarded. It seems very much in that cozy, there's no fail state thing. Spellcorked is just a very good time of that. It reminds me of the cocktail bar games I would play a lot on iOS. My the weird anime cocktail bar simulator game that I played that I actually learned real
I remember
recipes.
that. What was that called? Man, I remember exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, you cannot get those games for love and money. Don't even try to Google them, folks. You'll just be sad. But the mechanics feel like that, except I'm not learning actual recipe proportions that I could take back to my home bar because it's all spells. But I like that felt very different in that it was a simulator game than a lot of the other very tactical action games I was playing. Did either of you pick up Spellcorked?
I dabbled in it briefly, but it was not one of the season 1 games I spent much time with.
That's totally fair.
The ones that I did spend the most time with were probably Zipper and Snak. And part of this was probably just because they were both, games by big name indie devs. Zipper is by Bennett Foddy and Snak is by Zach Gage. I spent the most time with Snak, so I guess I'll start with that one. Snak is
Same here. Played a lot of that one.
I've played so much of Snak. Snak is Snake. If you have played a Snake game on any device at any point, you know what Snake is and how it works. And this is one of those. But it is, first of all, pretty fast-paced for a Snake game. And secondly, it adds a very crucial mechanic, which is a jump button. This is a Snake game where you can jump, and if you land on your own back, you can kind of it's hard to describe it as anything other than grinding. It feels kind of like you're a snake that can grind on its own back, Tony Hawk style. It's incredible.
You've also failed to mention one of the ways that it is different from the original Snake, which is it's kind of a sequel in that this is the revenge of the apples. Because the apples from the original Snake game are now attacking you.
Yes, that's true.
They
That's
have
true.
they have little mouths. They come in from the side of the screen, trying to bite you. And if they bite you, they slowly crawl their way up towards the snake's head. And then if they get to the snake's head, you lose.
Yes.
So,
Mhm.
But if they
um,
are on your body, you can jump onto your body and then sort of grind along
You
your
can
own back in order to
you can
eat
eat
them
them
off
off
of
your
your
own back. It's
Ah,
rad.
it's so good. And it has multiple levels. Like there's Snak, there's SNAK, there's SNAAK, there's SNAAAK, etc. There's different sort of levels that mostly affect how fast the game moves. I don't know about you guys. My high score for the base level Snak game is something like 200. Let me check. And I was pretty happy with that score. But the online, 194. But the online leaderboards are freaking absurd, man. Like, this is a game that, like, at one point I was like 36th best, and I was very proud of myself. And that is no longer the case. The numbers are really up there. So it is a game that you can absolutely get really, really advanced at. I loved it. The other game I was going to mention briefly is Zipper by Bennett Foddy. Bennett Foddy, that famously of like Getting Over It and a bunch of other strange games. Quap,
Soon to
I
be
think is
that
also
weird
him.
baby one.
Oh
Baby
yeah,
steps,
yeah.
which
The
I am looking forward to next year.
the true walking simulator. Can't wait.
Yes.
But yeah, he made a game that's very unusual for him. It's a sort of ZX Spectrum style isometric puzzle game, puzzle action game, turn-based thing, where you are playing as a absurdly fast swordsman. It's played on a grid. It's set in a sort of I don't know what you call the
it's like a samurai
black and white samurai movie kind of vibe.
Mm.
And it's all about getting yourself in position so that you can do these like ultra fast, like, the moment in samurai movies where the swordsman runs past the bad guy and slices him up so quickly that he doesn't realize he's dead until he turns around and falls apart. That kind of like trope. That's what this game is, basically. It's about moving on a grid in a turn-based manner where you're trying to set yourself up to do these like fast slashes and destroy your opponents before they can kill you. And it takes place in a really big complex. You're sort of like storming a like samurai type of complex, killing a bunch of people on your way in. I haven't beat this one because it's balls hard. There's walkthroughs and stuff out there for this one, and you really need them if you're going to actually complete it, probably. But it is really cool. It might be, I think, the most unique game in season 1. I really, really like this one. And the only reason I haven't beaten it, I spent a long time playing it. The only reason I haven't beaten it is that it is extraordinarily hard. And once you die, you have to start over. And so I played a lot of hours of it, but I never quite got all the way there. But I really, really like it. So I think if you happen to have, skipped Zipper for one reason or another, it's maybe one of the best things in season 1.
No, that's something I have to go back to. I can't stop playing Omaze, which is the little like, it's a maze where you go through circles. So a maze of O's. Honestly, I picked it up because people were saying like it's one of the games that use the crank the most, and it is a crank heavy game, but I really found it almost meditative. Like it's got just a bit of like dexterity, but you get to feel a little bit puzzly. Like another one that is more of a toy game, but the levels were pretty different. Like there are a lot of levels in that thing. I don't know how far y'all got, but that was one of my best pick up and plays, is navigating through just a series of weird black and white circles. This game also looks terrible in screenshots. It's one of the worst looking games in screenshots. It just looks like a bunch of Target logos.
I haven't played this one at all. It didn't look that appealing to me, but I'm glad to hear there's more to it.
It looks like garbage, but if you watch like a quick video of someone playing, it really is quite fun. And I think it's that the thing is, because you're navigating through circles and some are moving and not, it's like going through a bunch of cogs. You're like constantly switching direction, and like you're navigating as a little circle inside a bunch of other circles. So it is, when you're doing a bunch of quick turns in a game and you suddenly like find yourself confusing right and left, you start doing that with a crank and being like, no, not backwards, I meant to go forwards. And that's the kind of self-induced panic that I like in a puzzle game that's actually almost a dexterity game. So Omaze is a really good hidden gem. I think it's underrated because it looks bad. I mean, I get it. Minimalist is a style, but it looks like it's just a circle with an eye in it, and I didn't touch it until someone told me it was a puzzly game. I also have a stupid rec from sideloading.
Sure.
I encourage folks to look at France Horn, which is a game that someone has made a French horn that you can play, but it loops around on itself infinitely while you play games, and you use the crank. It's like a theremin. You play the Playdate like a theremin with the crank, and there's a gif of a man playing a French horn, but it is spiraled like 30 times more than it should, and you are just it's like a Monty Python image.
I've seen this. This is so funny. I didn't actually download it, but it looks incredible.
It's totally free. You crank the brass, is what they say, and it is totally free, very easy to sideload. It is. I still don't have a fishing game, and yet I have a French horn Monty Python simulator.
Yeah. I've really appreciated the sideloading feature on the Playdate. It's been really nice to be able to grab things from itch or whatever, as people release them. And it, like I feel good about like spending 99 cents or whatever on itch.io and grabbing some weird little thing like a French horn simulator. My favorite sideload game that I've played in the last little while, and this is a bit of a cheat because it's a port of a game that kind of went viral on the web. Did either of you happen to see a few weeks ago, there was like a Hacker News article about a game called Paku Paku. A developer, Japanese sort of indie developer, just released this thing on GitHub, and somebody posted it to Hacker News, and then I saw it on like waxy.org, like Andy Bayo's blog, and it sort of went everywhere. At least in the corners of the internet that I'm in. And it is a one-dimensional Pac-Man. Did you happen to see this? It's such a funny, clever idea.
I played the one kill Pac-Man, but I don't know. One-dimensional Pac-Man I have not played. What if all I sideload are Pac-Man games?
I know.
And the French horn simulator and Sudoku. Like, that's all I'm doing.
So imagine Pac-Man, except instead of a maze, it is a single hallway. It is a single sort of stripe across the screen. It wraps left to right, and there's just one hallway. You're Pac-Man. There is one super pellet and one ghost in this hallway, and your goal is to try to get that pellet and eat the ghost, or eat the pellet. Eat the
Does
dots.
The world still wrap around?
It does. That's the saving grace. It's very fast paced. It is taking Pac-Man, already a fairly minimal game, and making it as minimal as you can possibly imagine. And if you search this like Paku Paku, one-dimensional Pac-Man or whatever, like you can play the like original GitHub version of this on your phone. Like it's a single button, like tap to reverse kind of thing. But somebody made a Playdate port of this, and it's perfect on the Playdate. It's an excellent Playdate port. It feels 100% exactly like the web version, and it's a great game on the Playdate. So I would recommend that. And because it's like a port of a game that was already free, of course, the developer of this made it free. You can get it on itch and sideload it very easily. I've seen a lot of ports of little like games like that. I saw there's a really good port of we talked about a game called Combo Pool when we did the Pico 8 episode, and there's a really good Playdate port of Combo Pool called Combi Pool.
I'm gonna get that. I loved Combo Pool.
Yeah, me too. Like this is something there's been a lot of this is like little like ports of little games to the Playdate, and most of these end up on itch. And the fact that like you can grab these things for free or a couple of bucks on itch and sideload them on your Playdate has been a big plus for the device for me. So all things considered, the Playdate is definitely still a part of my gaming life. It's not like replaced any devices, but it's filled some weird little cracks and niches in my like game playing life that it continues to do 2 years on. And it's also like easier to get now than it ever was. When we were first talking about the Playdate, it kind of felt a little absurd because it was like, hey, we got our Playdates because we pre-ordered them within 15 minutes of them going on sale. And if you want one now, you can get it 6 to 12 months from now. Why don't you go do that? But now, like, you can go on Panic's website and get a Playdate, and it ships this month. I don't know exactly what the timeline is, but it's like much more like buying a thing in a way that you would expect. The price did go up just a tiny bit. I think it's now $200 or not, $199 or something like that. I think when we bought it, it was like $20 cheaper. That's just due to inflation and other factors, but like they've had some minor under the hood hardware revisions to keep the thing in stock and to continue to be able to get the silicon that they need. They've had a number of really major like software updates. The thing's continuing to be supported by Panic, continuing to be supported by its community of indie developers. And there's still new games dropping on the catalog store every week, between like 3 and 8 new games on the Playdate every week, which is wild. And I'm still checking in on that thing all the time. So I'm really pleased to say that like the Playdate continues to be a thing. And I still recommend. I know that $200 is not nothing. And with $200, you're like halfway to a Steam Deck or something, and it's a lot of money for something that's going to be
$200 including 24 games.
Yeah, including 24 games and access to the store with exclusives. Like everything on this thing is exclusive.
Here's something else you should know if you're shopping for a Playdate. If you're on the fence here, I looked into this a little while ago. The Playdate is routinely goes for in the neighborhood of about $150 on eBay used. Mm-hmm. And if you purchase a used Playdate, when you set it up with a new account and activate it for the first time, you get Season 1. So the games of Season 1 are not tied to the account of the first purchaser or anything like that. You're in there for the full season of games. So
That's
you can
awesome.
Yeah, I'm looking at I went back and Googled just now, $140 shipped is some of the recent sold comps on eBay. So I think this is a great piece of hardware to be just keeping an eye on. $200 was a little steep when I first signed up to buy the thing, especially considering I had to wait for like a year to actually get it in my hands. $200 ain't worth what it used to be. This is $200 in it was April of 2022 that the Playdate was released, which those $200 go a little farther these days. So or don't go as far these days, I should say.
One tip I'll say, I bought the Playdate without its accompanying magnetic case and really regretted it, and eventually had to wait a long time and bought the case separately. I would recommend the case. I think the case is a like integral part of the device, for me at least. Being able to have its little...
I really don't get it.
Oh, really? For me, like I love the little case. It magnets on, it magnets closed. When I stick it in my pocket, it can go in there along with like I don't put it in with my keys or whatever, but it goes in with my AirPods, and I feel pretty secure about it. And I don't have to have like a bulky like padded thing to stick it in. It can just go in my pocket. Whereas I don't think I would feel comfortable with that without it. So I do really recommend, if you are buying the thing, go ahead and spend the extra $20 and get the case. And also, I've been really pleased. I put a little like dorky lanyard on my Playdate, and that has also helped a lot with the experience. So that was like a $1 Amazon purchase. So I really recommend doing a little bit of basic accessorizing on the Playdate. Makes the experience a little better. But yeah, I totally recommend folks get it. And if you have any thoughts about the Playdate, or if you have specific Playdate, especially like sideload games or games on the catalog that we may not have checked out that you've enjoyed on your Playdate, let us know. Like I don't think that we're probably going to end up at the place where we're like talking about like a Playdate game as like the weekly game that we talk about on the Short Game, but you never know.
Except
Like
Lucas
honestly,
Popes.
yeah, honestly, maybe Lucas Popes, we might do that. But like, it's still something that I think, I play it all the time. I still love to chat about it. So, and it's funny, like people still don't know what the Playdate is. Like I brought mine on my trip to Puerto Rico recently and like brought it out I was sitting at a bar waiting and like had like 3 people ask me about it and ask to hold it. It's just one of those things that like people haven't seen it, lots of folks don't know about the Playdate and are really interested in it when they see it. So I think it still has like a potential market or audience that it hasn't reached yet. So listeners, thank you for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. You can find us on the internet at shortgame.fm. That is our website. We've got all the links and buttons there, including a link to our Patreon. All of our patrons get instant access to our Discord community, which is where we talk about the game. We talk about the Playdate if you want to talk about the Playdate. We talk about upcoming games on the show and announce what's coming up. We take recommendations of games from our listeners. Our Recommend a Game channel is easily my favorite thing about doing this podcast because people constantly are dropping in there to tell us about new games that are coming out, tell each other about new games that are coming out or that they've played that they think sort of fit the Short Game vibe. It's a really great hang. So join us there. We would love to have you. You can also find me on the internet at Raygan, RAYGAN.me. And that's just my website, but it has like links to all of my socials and everything if you want to find me on Mastodon or wherever else. Laura, where can people find you?
You can generally find me on places Laura J. Nash, especially Blue Sky and Mastodon, Laura J. Nash at bird.rodeo.
And Shane, where can people find you?
Find me on Mastodon at Shane at bird.rodeo.
And listeners, thank you once again for joining us on this episode of The Short Game.